Hello everybody, it's Matilda's coming at you once again after several month hiatus. I have been promising for ages now to do a recording for my class Ridiculously Easy Flowers for Border Illustrations. I've taught it twice now. It's a really popular class. Not everyone has been able to attend that, and I respect that. I've been promising to do a video for people who either couldn't see what I was doing up close during the class or for people who couldn't attend. So today's video, I'm going to demonstrate some of the styles of flowers. I'm going to explain a little bit about the background, and then I'm going to do an artist trading card in the style. Maybe more than one artist trading card depending on how much time we have. And then if I'm really feeling crazy, I might pull out a larger scroll blank, and if not use, then at least demonstrate where and how to lay out something like that. So let's get started here. This is my class handout, Ridiculously Easy Flowers for Border Illustrations. I've got lots of pictures in here that I'll be showing you in just a moment. I've got my palette, I've got my water, I have my ridiculously expensive coffee drink, whose brand shall remain nameless. Okay, the book industry of the time. A lot of people think of manuscripts as being produced in monasteries by monks and nuns, and it being a very slow and laborious process. And for part of our time period, that was true. However, with the rise, the invention of the university and the rise of university culture throughout Europe and other parts of the world, the demand for books skyrocketed. You also started seeing the church expand the idea of personal devotionals, prayer books, books of hours, things that people could keep with them at home. And those became more readily available and more popular as early as the 13th century. By at least the 1400s, workshops were making stock books for sale rather than relying on just individual commissions. You also had the university system where people would rent portions of books, copy them themselves, return one section and rent out the next section and keep going until they had the entire textbook copied. For our purposes, we're going to focus on the books of hours because they were more decorated. Textbooks were mostly just words. You didn't see a whole lot of illustration in them that I'm aware of. Since the demand was high for these manuscripts, their decoration style had to be quick and easy to produce. Over time, the flowers got simpler and simpler. The leaves became very easy. If you zoom in on some of the manuscript exemplars, you'll see places where they were coloring outside the lines. They made their acanthus leaves smaller and thinner until they were basically just swirls that didn't look anything like the biological examples that they descended from. Gold leaf elements are made smaller, or they replaced leaf with shell gold, which is something that they could paint down in one step. The style varies by region. In Germany, you tended to have more robust leaves and flowers. In France, Flanders, you tended to have more delicate styles. It also varied by time period. Throughout the time period, they got steadily simpler and more delicate, quicker and easier to produce. Let me see. For our purposes in the SCA, when we're producing a scroll and we have a tight deadline, this is a quick and easy style to do that has a minimum of effort for a maximum of result. They look stunning when they're held up in court. They look amazing when they're hanging on somebody's wall. And nobody has to know that you basically doodled the whole effort. Nobody believes me when I say that they're easy, especially when we look at the samples on the next couple of pages. But I promise you they really are. Now for this class, we'll be focusing primarily on the Flemish, Dutch, and French styles from the mid to late 1400s, especially the 1440 to 1480 range. This is because when I went searching for samples, I went to one website, the Walters Museum Digitized Manuscript Collection. I went exclusively for books of hours because those were by far the most frequently appearing books in the collection, and they all tended to range in that time frame, the 1440 to 1480 range. For this class, we'll be ignoring Acanthus leaves. They were an important element of the decoration, along with critters, heraldry, things like that. I'll touch on them briefly, but I'm not going to demonstrate them because I don't want this video to take 3 hours. So let's get started. I keep saying let's get started when I've already started. So ridiculously easy border elements. I have made up these names. These are not technical or scholarly terms, but they work for me. There are a couple different types of flowers. There are a couple different types of leaves, and then there are other bits. The flowers, I call them X flowers. You can modify those into asterisks. An X flower looks like that. This is your stem coming off of it. You'll have several of these maybe. And here's an X, and here's an X. And sometimes they're close to 90-degree angles like here. Sometimes they're really, really not. Sometimes they're modified into an asterisk. To make these, you draw a little circle in the middle, and with your paintbrush, you're going to make a stroke here, and a stroke here, a stroke here, a stroke here, a stroke here, a stroke like this. And what it ends up looking like is a sort of shape like that is filled in. These are typically in red or blue. I've seen both. You color this in gold. You may or may not want to highlight the petals with silver or gold, depending on whether you used blue or red. Doesn't really make much difference. Another thing I've seen them do is take these, do them in blue, and then put a little red dot at the tip here, so that they don't have to exaggerate the shape. They can just make it even kind of diamond shaped and put a dot here, here, and here, and it exaggerates that a little bit so that it looks more like this from a distance. Those are X flowers. O flowers, so called because you make an O. You fill this all in with one color, usually red, sometimes pink, and then you go back with another color. If you're using red, you'll do this in gold. If you're using pink, you'll do this in red. You draw a center point, and then you draw petals around it. They're elongated. This is not a round shape, it's an oval shape. But you go around and around and around until it's filled in. You color this part in gold, and it's done. If you like, you can add little bristles coming out between the petals. But that's a whole extra step that you can afford to skip if you want to. Those are O flowers. Next up are what I call VW or chicken foot flowers. They look like tulips. So called because you start with a V, you add a W. That is your flower. Alternately, you draw a chicken foot, and then you fill it in. So these would come off of a stem. You'll sometimes see them go back through and add background petals like that. You'll sometimes see them look more cup-shaped, very tulipy, and again, they may or may not have background petals in there. But these are really straightforward dinosaur foot, chicken foot, VW flowers. Lobed flowers, you did these in kindergarten. You start with a circle, and you draw lobes around it. You can draw 4, you can draw 5, you can draw 6. It's just a matter of how you fit them all together. Typically, you want to be consistent with these so that they're all 4 or all 5 or all 6. And then you go back through with maybe green or gold and add these just to make them look snazzy. You can skip that step though. Lobed flowers. A variation on lobed flowers are the square lobed flowers. You square them off. That's simple. This is going to be a 5-lobed flower. These are often done in blue. You can also do them in purple to make them a little more lifelike. Again, this is filled in with gold. You may or may not put a little stroke in the center. You may or may not come across here to exaggerate it a little bit. Not necessary. They look just fine without it. And then finally, one of my favorites are fan flowers. Fan flowers. You have your stem, comes out in a fan shape. Very exaggerated. There's something under my paper. Give me 2 seconds. Fan flowers. These usually get a little bit of green here, colored in. These are most often done in white. I have rarely seen them done in a rich yellow gold. It's almost always white. They get a pink line across here and a couple of pink strokes there, and it's done. If you do them in yellow, these lines are done in a rust red. It's much warmer. It looks really cool. But I almost exclusively see those done in white. And then you get combination flowers. For example, an X flower or a lobe with a bulb or spikes coming off of it. Here's lobe with spikes, for example. An X flower with a bulb. It looks like this, but then it has a bulb underneath that the stem comes off of. Those are combination flowers. They're not difficult. These are all just doodles that took me a couple seconds to do each of. They're not any particular stress. You're not looking for precision here. In fact, if they're a little sloppy, it tends to add character to the piece. So be comfortable, be relaxed when you do these. Have fun with it. Those are flowers. I'm going to flip my paper over. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to turn my paper around. Leaves, you have tea leaves. They look like that. Your stem comes up. That's a leaf. Doesn't look like much. And then you have your flower coming off of it, or a lobed flower or whatever. V leaves. That's not quite right. They're more pointy. W leaves are sort of a variation of the tea leaf. Those are also chickenfoot leaves. And then you have a lot of teardrop leaves. You have leaves that are just a swirl with a flick coming off of it. With your paintbrush, that'll end up looking very teardrop shaped. Maybe a little lopsided, sort of like that. Then you have oval leaves, leaf-shaped leaves. These may or may not have bristles coming off of them. You can go for holly leaves, which start like this, and then as you're painting, you take your brush and you flick, 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 flick. And now it's sort of a pointy, sharp-looking leaf like a holly leaf. Very simple. Fruit and other bits. I have seen pears. I mostly see berries. So you get a stem, and it's coming off here. And maybe it hangs down, and you do berries. Or you can do strawberries. Strawberries are super easy. They're sort of a triangle. And then you just go doop, 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 doop. They don't have to be perfect. You can have one come up and stick up if you want a little character there, but you don't have to. Stem comes off like that. Larger elements include acanthus leaves, birds, weird mythical creatures that don't exist in real life. Those I'm not going to touch on too much. They're fun if you're personalizing a scroll. I did one recently. The person's heraldry had a wolf with wings on it. So in the border, I hid a wolf with wings. But it's not something that's crucial to the overall elements of the border. They're nice to have, they help break up the pattern, but they're not really under the purview of this class. This class is about ridiculously easy flowers. And then you have fillers. Fillers are actually more important than you think they are. Fillers are dots, squiggles, tendrils, and starbursts. Dots. You do dots. Let's say you have a flower design. You've got a flower here, you've got a flower here. You put your leaves, you've got a flower here. That looks pretty good. It's pretty dense. Then you go back and you fill in with dots or a collection of 3 very small dots. Or you can add tendrils to your stems. A starburst is a dot that has rays coming off of it. They also look a little bit like squash spiders. If you have a thing against spiders, go ahead and call them that. You can call them starbursts, whatever you want to call them. But these are the basic elements that go into a border. So when you're laying out your scroll, you're going to use these elements. There are a few tips to follow. If you have an exemplar, that is wonderful. Let the exemplar be your guide. Let it show you how dense the population is here. Let it show you how large the flowers are in relation to the stems. And then when you're ready to start, what you'll do is you'll pencil in your elements first like I did. You'll break it into sections if the exemplar calls for it. So if you have, actually here's my scroll blank, let's take a look at this. Down here is a great place to put the kingdom seal. So we'll just lightly sketch a circle there. If I were being more precise, I would pull out a circle maker. Sometimes I trace a large coin, sometimes I draw a circle with a compass, doesn't matter. Kingdom seal. Up here is a good place for the person's heraldry if they have it. Right about here is a good place for the award badge. So now you've divided this into sections. You're not doing an entire border, which could be intimidating or could look a little monotonous. You have a section, and you have a section, you have a section. Through here, you tend to just do one stem and another stem, generally. Look at your examples to see what they do. Here's a good place to hide a critter. Here's a good place to hide a critter. Here's a good place to hide a critter. Here where the heraldry is another good spot. These are smaller things that will hide in among the vines. You don't have to worry about putting vines there, or you can overlap their space a little bit, things like that. And then you work largest to smallest. You start with the badges because they're big. Then you do your Acanthus Leaves, birds, critters, because they're also large but a little smaller. Then you start penciling in your vines all through here. You draw your flowers and your leaves coming off of those. Oh, stem joints. I forgot to talk about stem joints. Let me flip this over here. A stem joint, you have a vine or a stem, and it's going to fork, and you put a dot right there. These are often done in gold. You can sometimes see 2 stems go this way, and you take this squiggle here, or not squiggle, this empty space, and you color it in green or gold. And then you have, your leaves coming off of it. You save the fillers for later. You do those after your flowers and your leaves and things are done. You work largest to smallest, and you sort of build layers. You have your flowers, you have your leaves. You have your background dots and squiggles and tendrils, and then you have any empty space that's left. Drawing the leaves and flowers, you have two approaches. One is the skeleton, where you draw an interior frame. For example, the V or the chicken foot here that's inside, or the X for the X flowers. The other is an outline where you draw the exterior of the flower, like the dinosaur foot here, or the O up here, and then you color them in. Next up, once you've got everything penciled in, you're going to color it. I usually like to work all one color at a time. It's aesthetically pleasing to my little brain when I'm doing it. It's not necessary, but it's nice to not have to keep going back and forth, rinsing your brush between every color. Some people prefer to work, start at the bottom, work their way up physically, and so they change red to blue to red to blue to green to red to blue. Whatever makes you happy. I tend to do all the red and then all the blue and then all the green, etc. Skip your vines and stems. You're going to go straight to the flowers. You're going to do shadows, if any, depending on the element. Not every element had them. Again, look at your exemplar to see what they did. Highlights and white work, if any. Those could be white, those could be gold or silver. And then you can outline everything in a dark color like black. Some people use ink. I find personally that my inks tend to bleed into my paint and mess up my work, so I usually stick with paint. You can use a dark brown. Sometimes you'll use a light blue flower and outline it in dark blue or even purple. It's again, look at your exemplar and see what you've got going on. Then you do your background fillers, and then you're pretty much done. You step back and you admire your work. That's an important step, actually. So I'm going to pull out my handout, and I'm going to look at some examples here. See if I can zoom in just a little bit. Let's see if the camera will let me zoom in. There we are. All right, I've zoomed in just a fair bit. I hope that the other examples were not too far away and that you were able to see them. If not, I will be working on a card here momentarily and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. These are O flowers. They were done in a lighter red. They were outlined in a darker red and then gold. These are O flowers with a little bit of a base on them. This is a variation of a fan flower. Here's a very obvious fan flower. You can see the triangle shape. It's just right here. Here are some W leaves or chicken foot leaves. Here are some spiky oval leaves. Here are some stem joints in dots. These are a squared off lobe flower, and they've got almost like a bulb behind them. Let me see. Here are some X flowers. These leaves are very triangle-y. They're not even T's, they're just triangles. It's a shape, and then they have squiggles coming off the tips. I don't know how well you can see that. Turning the page, assuming my pages will cooperate. Here we have some more lobes. These are some chicken foot, some tulipy flowers that I was telling you about. See how they made this one very wide and this one relatively narrow, but then they went back behind it with a darker color. These are the acanthus leaves I was telling you about. They're very pretty. They're not very biological. They don't have to be. They're not very lifelike. This is a stem with some sort of fruit coming off of it. This is sort of an asterisk flower right here with a T shape, a fan flower, some teardrop shaped leaves throughout, O flowers. Let's keep going. More fans. This is kind of a hybrid. You've got a bulb here with a fruit or an unopened flower coming off of it. This is a very obvious O flower. These are more lifelike up here. These are pansies, but they're basically a lobed flower. You start with a little circle and you just go, and you color 2 of them purple and 3 of them white. Down here, we've got more of those VW or chicken foot flowers, and you see how they went back in behind and did darker in addition to what was already there. The rest of my handout, this is a 14-page handout, and 12 of them are color illustrations. But you get the idea when you look through these. I've got whole pages, I've got double pages. Oh, here's a good one. I want to show you this. Not every page has a border all the way around. Here's our text block. The text block begins and ends. Can I zoom that? Can I fit that? And the border just fits the text block. It's just along one side and done. An elegant capital, an elegant side border, finite. Really simple. I do want to show you a quick variation on the fan flowers. The fans are very triangular, but you see how some of these have an oval. They look more like a cup. Let me take a quick second to show you how to do those. So an ordinary fan looks like this. A cup flower is a little more convex rather than concave, and this here comes around. You still have a triangle shape here. You still trace this in your pink. You may just use only dots to get sort of a petal shape all the way around. You don't have to paint that line. You can just do a dot, 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 and it gives you a round shape, and then you flick down along the outside. And then on the inside, you may or may not put some yellow or gold, and that's your stem. That's a more realistic looking flower. It takes more steps. I tend not to do these simply because I've fallen in love with these, and I'm often in a hurry and going for quick and dirty when I create scrolls of this style. So I've explained lots and lots of steps, but I haven't shown you any colors yet. Let's break out the paintbrush. A note about paintbrushes. I'm a big fan of not using teeny tiny brushes. They drive me a little crazy. If you have a larger brush like this, you can fill it with paint and can do long, smooth curves without having to reload every quarter inch. You get smooth lines, you can color in, you can keep going for a while. It makes me happy. This particular brush is a size 4. It's a synthetic bristle. It's from my class kits that I use. Some people are a little intimidated by a brush this big, but all you need is a sharp point, which this brush has. So I'm going to get it wet. I'm going to water down here. This is my class palette. In my kits, it has white, green, blue, red. And honestly, that's just about all you need. I have some other colors off to the side here. I have larger palettes that I like to use. I have a lighter blue and a darker blue. I have some pinks. I have gold and silver, and I'm going to use those, but for class, you don't really need them a whole lot. Here's my gold. Here's my silver. It often gets asked in class what I'm using. These are Winsor Newton gouaches. They're very high quality. These are Calero, aka Finetech, mica-based metallic paints. They are fantastic. You can get all of these at John Neal Booksellers. I probably shouldn't do much more product placement than that, so I'm going to stop there. I had a pink palette around here somewhere. Where did it go? Now I'm going to skip it. So with our card, the first thing I want to do is sketch everything out. And you're going to want to fill space with this. A thing that I never used to do and that you didn't see in earlier period scrolls or earlier period manuscripts was letting the vines touch each other. You tended to see swirls that took up a lot of space, but they didn't touch. They didn't cross. In this style, they sometimes do. You'll have one vine go up this way, one stem, and another stem go up this way, and you're freaking out because they cross. They'll sometimes put like a little flowery cup thing here to hold the stems to show where they can join. So put 2 vines on your card. The next thing you're going to do is put 2 different kinds of flowers. Vine A gets flower A, vine B gets flower B. It doesn't matter which you use. For the sake of this class, I think I'm going to I usually use X flowers and O flowers. But I think today, just for fun, I'm going to go fan flowers and lobed flowers. So, here's a fan. Here's a fan. Here's a fan. Up here at the end is a fan. You can make them wide. You can make them narrow. Remember, they're not supposed to be perfect. You want to have a little character here. On the other side, we'll put our lobed flowers. And the lobes are like, they take up a large circular space. So if you're trying to figure out where to put them, sketch a couple circles first. We'll put one here. Here's a big place for our circle. We'll put one here. Draw a little circle. And then you draw the lobes around it. This is going to come off probably this way. This is going to come off this way. Keep track of where your flowers come from. You don't have to paint the stems right now, but knowing where they are is kind of important. Otherwise, things get a little hairy later when you start filling in space and you can't figure out what connects to what. Now that you have your flowers, it's time for your leaves. I'm going to just keep it simple and do ordinary leaf-shaped leaves. Coming over here. There's a lot of empty space here. I'm wondering what to put there. I think I will just put regular leaves on here anyway. So my leaves are going to look pretty much identical. I might use 2 different shades of green for this if I'm playing around. I might not. I have 2 shades of green. I may as well. When you are ready to paint, which I am, I didn't realize when I first taught this class that a lot of people taking it had never done any sort of scribing before at all. So I'm going to show you how to get your paint wet. Not a lot of people do that, or I had assumed everybody already knew how to do that, but I had absolute beginners in my class, so I'm going to cover this. Get your brush wet, and you drip maybe 4 or 5 drops of water into your paint. It's going to soak in. This is a dry paint cake, but that's okay. It means that you can add water little by little and not have a massive amount of wet paint blorping up your brush. The blorp, of course, is a technical term. I'm going to start with white. It's not going to show up very well on this card, but I don't care. I want white. My fan flowers are going to be white. Like I said, they're not going to show up very well. Let's get a little. If I were doing this on a black card, the white would show up very well and everyone would be really impressed. As it is right now, the camera highlights are showing that I am putting paint down, but it's the pencil is still showing through a little bit. I'm not very fond of that, but I'll be able to cover it in a little bit. I have had people ask me, so what do you do with the pencil lines once you're finished? And the answer is you ignore them. You're going to cover them all up with your paint. And what you don't cover up will just add to the character. Now, if you have something really obvious, for example, this circle here around the outside of the flower, then you might go back and erase, but you may not have to. We'll see when we get there. So that's my white flowers all painted in. Oh, I missed one. Now it's all my white flowers painted in. Since those are going to be white and pink, I'm going to do my lobed flowers in blue. I kind of want to cheat and use colors not on my class palette, but I'm not gonna. If you're taking my class, these are the colors you get. And I don't want you to get false expectations by me using colors that aren't part of the palette. This is ultramarine blue. It's a period color. In period, it was crazy expensive. In about the 1800s, they figured out how to synthesize it, and now it's one of the least expensive pigments available. This one, blue. See how I don't have to constantly refill my brush. I have color here, and I can just go and go and go and go and go. This is why I have a soapbox about large brushes. They make me happy. It's a little uneven, and it's also a little wetter than I usually go, but I'm trying to hustle along here. Blue, lots and lots of blue. This is going to be red here, in case anybody was curious. I like to balance my colors out where I can. Again, you don't have to freak out about everything being super precise. It's not gonna be in a quick and dirty style. You want it to look quick and dirty, sort of. Not too quick and not too dirty. You don't want people to think that you didn't care. I do care. I just also want this to be a free, sort of whimsical piece with a lot of character to it. And if it's too rigid, if it's too precise, that's not the character that I'm going for. There is a time and a place for precise. Celtic knotwork comes to mind. But for a lot of these pieces, I mean, it blows my mind to think that these are hundreds, and in some cases over 1,000-year-old manuscripts that still exist, and we still have access to the people who made them. We can still identify distinct handwriting in manuscripts. We can still see where two different artists took over from one another in a manuscript. That humanity, that character, shines through in this style, and that's something that I really admire. Plus, it's a lot less stress, not having to be super precise. But you see what we're doing here. Well, first we doodled, and now we're coloring. It's just not something to get stressed about. That's all the blue. Let's do the green next. Drip a couple drops onto our color. Pick it up. I can't remember exactly what green this is. It might be Terre Verte. If it is, I know people who hate working with Terre Verte. Terre Verte is French. It just means green earth. There is a place somewhere in the world where the clay is green. Kind of like yellow ochre or red Georgia clay, which is red ochre. There are places where it is just naturally green, which blows my mind. Terre Verte has a tendency towards translucency. You kind of need to go over it more than once. It can be a bit of a pain. But I really like the shade, and so that was the green that I selected when I was putting together my kits. Come back here. I want more color. There we go. It might be time for a short coffee break. If this were a Zoom class, this is when I would be asking if anybody had any questions, but unfortunately I don't have that luxury. For the lobed flowers, I want to do something a little different. Just add a little character here. I decided I'm not going to do two different colors after all, so I'm going to do just two slightly different styles. I don't think... No, I do think you might remember me talking about the holly leaves. They typically work best for me if I'm going away from myself, so... Click, 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 click. That's one. Up here. Click, 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 click. If you need to, you can go back in and give them a little bit more body. Now, they operated so small in their books of hours. Some of those books were only the size of your hand. So you can imagine how much smaller the flowers were. They could be, and the leaves. You could do a stroke and a stroke and be finished with your leaf. Oh yeah, speaking of green. I always forget to do these on the fan flowers. Now you can see where I got a little sloppy here. I'm outside of the lines. I legitimately do not care. It's just not a crucial thing with this piece. The red I'm using is alizarin crimson, which is a synthesized version of a period color madder red. It's a cool red. It tends towards purple rather than orange. However, I think I probably would have been better served picking up something like cadmium red, which is a warmer red. When you turn this into pink, it is a lovely cool pink. It looks great on these white flowers. But when you do, for example, your O flowers, the warm red looks better. And I only wanted to pick one red for each kit. Those are a little heavy. the main thing when you're doing this is consistency of style, I guess you could say. It's funny because I just said you want to be a little sloppy, but you want to be consistently sloppy, if that makes sense. Um, if you're going to be delicate all the way throughout. If you're going to be heavy all the way throughout. I tend towards a lighter touch typically. And I know people who tend towards a heavier touch. And it's not my style, but it's completely valid to do what works for your own hand and your own art style. I'm trying to hurry here, and it's making things a little less delicate than I'm used to. There we go. A nice thing about this, you're covering your pencil lines, which means if you made any bobbles, you can fix it. You're going to hide it with color anyway. It doesn't matter. I'm a big fan of heck with it. I've heard of people taking their scrolls, discovering a mistake, and literally tearing it up and throwing it away. And I can't imagine doing that to something you've put so much time and effort into. And this is a piece, this funky stem joiner, I guess you could call it. They look vaguely flower-like. You can take these and do them in a warm red with gold, and it looks quite nice. I'm using a cool red. I'm less thrilled about that. I'm just going to color the whole thing in, because I'm going to come back in a minute in gold. I have had people ask, what color do you do the stems? The answer is it depends on your exemplar. Some manuscripts did them in ink. You pencil it in, you go back over it with your ink pen, and you're finished. Very useful for a lightweight style. Good for tendrils and squiggles and things. Other manuscripts did them in green, and you had a little bit more realistic kind of thing going on. I probably won't, but I might do one stem green, can't decide which yet, and one in ink, but that's not something I really go for terribly often. Let's get the gold wet. This stuff is fantastic. Love my Calero. You'll hear me say Calero and Finetech kind of interchangeably. The brand is from Germany. It was originally called Finetech. For no apparent reason that I know of, they changed it to Calero. Some people still think of Finetech when they think of this paint. John Neal sells it under both names to avoid confusion. I love this color. That is so rich and creamy. The gold is going to go on my red right here. I'm a little bit warpy. Let's get some of that excess paint off. If you have a paper towel, just touching it will get you back to that nice sharp point. If you have too much paint, if it's not a sharp point, you're not going to be able to do nice fine lines. Here we go. That looks lovely. We'll just go around. We'll show the inside a little bit. Done. Red, especially the alizarin crimson, tends to bleed like a stuck pig. So you're going to want to be careful with that. Your gold may end up sort of reddish gold. These tended not to be highlighted very often, so I'm not going to worry so much about them. The blue flowers and the centers are going to be gold. The rest of that I'm going to highlight in silver. The green could go either way. I have seen it highlighted with just on a white card. I have seen it outline in black and call it good. I've seen two different shades of green on black, which I like to work with fairly often. You would see it outlined or highlighted with either gold or silver, depending on, I guess, artist whim, whatever the artist felt like doing. In the interest of keeping this simple, I'm going to stick with gold. We'll just go a thin line up the middle. I do like how the light from my camera is hitting this. It's really showing the highlights well right now. From where I'm sitting, my eye's at a slightly different angle. The gold is much more subtle. But I do like that sparkle. Let's get one. There's nothing wrong whatsoever with turning your piece as you go. I know a lot of people like to tape their piece down to an easel. I don't know if it's a factor of being left-handed or a factor of just never wanting to learn that technique. I like to be able to move my piece here and there and hither and yon. You know what? Let's do silver after all. This stem will have gold highlights. The other stem will have silver highlights. It'll look really pretty. This particular silver tends to be very translucent. Now for highlights, you don't need a lot, but it takes a lot of work to get it opaque for anything else. I'm not terribly interested in opaque, but I do want some color here. Go. Stir it up. Take some of it back off again. Check your point. That should be okay. Let's do this one more time in a dry area to get as much of the water off as possible. We're gonna go, yeah, blorpy. I hate that. That doesn't look so bad, actually. I just favor really precise lines. Yeah, that's better. If you're working on a black background, I didn't dig out a black card today. I could have, but I chose not to. If you are working on black, the blue tends to blend in a little bit. It's low contrast, of course. Dark blue, dark background. And then you put the silver on and it just pops. It really lifts it up off the page. And from a distance, you're able to go, oh, there's something blue there that you couldn't see prior to putting the silver down. It's a really neat effect. Maybe one of these days I'll make a video for that and show it to you. I've done a Black Hours class. It was a Zoom class in 2020. Because we all loved lockdown, right? That was how I spent my lockdown, was doing Zoom classes. Some of those Zoom classes are very unedited, very disjointed. There we go. That's the precise line I'm looking for. Sorry, moved my card. Here. There we go. So that looks pretty good, right? Almost finished. Not quite. You can use black for the next stage. You can use gold for the next stage. I have gold in my student palette. Remember, if you were taking the class, this is all the color you get. As tempting as it is to play with some black, I am going to avoid that today. Go back to the gold, which is still kind of wet. This is going to be nice and opaque at this point, I think. I was talking about my Black Hours class. I've taught one. There is video of it. It is probably not the best. There was one class, and I can't remember which one it was. I had really bad sound. You can hardly hear what I'm saying, and I don't remember which one that was. I'm doing mostly starbursts here. You don't have to do mostly starbursts. I just kind of felt like it. They're nice because you can make them fill almost any shape of space. There we go. Here's a good spot for one. Remember how I said I might do one of these stems in green? I think I might just add a little more body to this piece. Just a little more body. Just a little. There were plenty of examples where they didn't. Again, you're going to want to go back, look at your exemplar, double check how they did it. But I'm going to put a little extra green on here just for grins and giggles. I don't know if my microphone is picking it up or not. But we have a cat. And the cat likes to chase the light. And the cat is upstairs directly above this room right now, and my husband is giggling as he makes her chase the light. She's thundering around like a little 10-pound elephant. That's adorable. A light touch for this. You don't want to go too heavy. There we go. It's nice, actually. I might even do it on both sides. Having this gives me the ability to do green tendrils, and those are another good filler. Tendrils are just little squiggles. Super simple. Filling in space is the name of the game at this point. Yeah, I am going to go ahead and do green stems for both. May as well keep it consistent. Wasn't gonna. It's not a requirement, but it does let me use my green. These are literally just squiggles. I think I've already said that, but it is true. And you keep going, and you keep going, and you keep going, and you operate with smaller and smaller and smaller elements. Another fun thing you can do is just dots in different colors. I've done one piece that was fairly open, and the background was just dense with purple and green and blue and yellow. My yellow, I think, was gold, actually. Dots. So I'm gonna, since I don't have a lot of red on here, let's see. There's a squiggle. I don't usually do red, but it looks cool. And that is pretty much finished. If I wanted to, I could outline these large gold dots in black to give them a little more presence on the page. But if we take this, tip it, it's actually fairly dark. You get it under the light, it's very shiny, which is quite nice. So this is a lovely effect when you hold it up in court, or when the king and queen and herald hold it up in court. It's all sparkly and the audience likes that. And then they do oohs and ahs, which is what we scribes get paid in. That's a very nice piece. I'm quite happy with that. Looks like I am at exactly an hour. Go me. I am very, very tempted to do another card. If I do, I think I'm going to do it in a separate video because it is close to lunchtime for me. I'm starting to get a little hungry and I have other things I need to take care of today, unfortunately. I would love to paint all day, but I also want my videos to be accessible enough that they don't take forever to watch. That is a card. If you were doing this as a scroll, you flip it over and you sign it on the back. Make sure you include your name and maybe an email for people to contact you. Everybody likes to be able to say thank you. If you ever receive one of these, take a moment to say thank you because your scribe did put in some effort, even if it's not as much effort as you thought it was. Once this is dry, if there's any really obvious pencil lines, you just work very carefully. It's not necessary. Especially if you're working on a black piece. They're hardly going to notice these pencil lines. This piece, assuming it were a full-size scroll, would be hung up and viewed from several feet away, and the pencil just isn't going to show. But there we are. There is a very simple card using ridiculously easy flowers, which is why I named the class what I did. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any questions, I'm going to post this to YouTube. I'm also going to post it on my website, matildis.art. M-A-T-I-L-D-I-S, matildis.art, A-R-T. Feel free to leave me a comment or a question there, or drop me an email. I love answering questions, and I hope to hear from you. Thank you all so much.